Welcome everyone to SBIFF Film Talk. This is our first time doing this, so I hope you all enjoy. Tonight we're doing a great film, Grasshopper for Grandpa, with our guest, Casey McGarry. So here's a clip from the film.
Come on down to the basement. We're in the space that has been referred to for decades as the basement of Jimmy's Oriental Gardens. It was always said for years in Jimmy's that, and the part of the Laura Chinatown downtown too, was that there were tunnels and basements where people smoked opium and played cards, gambled, played mahjong.
Well, I heard there was underground tunnels under the restaurant. I mean, across the street, and they were like opium dens, and
I used to hear about opium dens
Did
too.
you?
Yeah, but I never, outside of hearing them playing mahjong with the tiles, I used to smell things every once in a while, because you can smell the opium, you know, but I never actually.
There's tunnels all over that part of town. That's for real.
Are there really?
Oh yeah. There's catacombs down there that go all over the place. There was a tunnel that stretched all the way down to the water.
What do you think they were used for?
Oh, probably running rum off the beach.
As far as I know, besides the fact that that's Tommy's house right there, back there was Chinese labor at one point. This building, there's a whole bunch of units in it. I've heard that it was, besides just being Chinese labor, it was also a brothel. I've heard that from lots of people. None of that was in my lifetime, but it has a feeling like that would have worked out well here.
Were supposedly shootouts and all that sort of thing. The Chinatown allure was one of the things that made Jimmy's very cool.
The folklore is really part of the charm of this property, because no one could really dispute it and no one could prove it.
Hey, welcome Casey. Thank you so much for joining us on your trip right now. I'm glad we could track you down. Let's start with how Grasshopper for Grandpa came a part of your life and how you got started with this.
Sure, yeah. It was, I guess, nearing the end of 2014, and I just had the bug to work on a new documentary. I had been working on this music doc for years about my dad and his old band and stuff, and I really wanted to just do a completely new project. And I was also came to the end of a season on New Girl in TV I was working on in LA, and my boss convinced me to pursue my dreams of making documentary films more. And so I didn't end up going back to that job and moved back to Santa Barbara to make this film. And it was interesting when the idea of the film entered my brain and in my life. It was kind of serendipitous in ways, because I met two different people that were involved in the story. One was Bob Lovejoy, who owns Three Pickles Deli there next door. And the original one was actually where Handlebar is now on Cannon Perdido there. And he just really was fascinated by the building and really excited about remodeling the place to its original form for like 1947, to how the Chung family had that building. And then there was another friend of mine or acquaintance that I ran into around town who said he had a bunch of footage of Jimmy's and like all the patrons and the final months leading up to the closure back in 2006. So both those things kind of happened simultaneously in the matter of a few months, and I moved back to Santa Barbara in like September or October of 2014 and made the film, and don't know, it was like 2 months or 2.5 months, and then submitted to the film festival. But yeah, it was a crazy, beautiful kind of timeline and project. It all just magically worked out, and that fast, it was pretty crazy. But, it worked out. It was fun.
What's interesting about the film is that it really is a 3-part love letter. Here you have the history of Santa Barbara Chinatown, and then you have the Chung family, and then you go into the Lovejoys and the restoration. Can you talk a little bit about shooting it in that light?
Yeah, I think I just really wanted to tell the full story and not, just tell part of the story. And I love history and stuff, and Santa Barbara history is really fascinating for being such a small little beach town. That something like this, especially involving like an immigrant community and the Chinese population, which I knew nothing about, was fascinating to me. So I really wanted to tell that part of the story. And all the mystery and mystique around that aspect is really cool. And then the Bob Lovejoy and the Lovejoy family, I grew up around the corner from them on the Mesa, and used to drive his daughter to school, to volleyball practice and stuff. So they were just like another mom and dad to me in some ways. So it was just kind of how I wanted to tell the story and how everything connected. It seemed like the right way to do it, and I didn't want to step in any shoes and like have any bad blood with anybody involved in the whole kind of evolution of the building and the business and the restaurant and the bar. So I told all parts of it equally, I think.
Now, it's interesting because you have made this doc to be 30 minutes long, and what's interesting is I know there's probably so much more footage and photos that you could have went through. Can you talk a little bit about the process of going through all that footage and narrowing it down to tell the story you wanted to tell?
Yeah, there really wasn't that much, I guess, mini DV footage. I used a good amount of it. There was some weird old cell phone stuff because it was in the mid 2000s, so the technology was pretty grainy and pretty bad. But I kind of milked the amount of footage I could out of that stuff. And then the old photographs, there were a good amount of black and whites that were beautiful, and most of those are in the film. And then there was these weird old like voice recordings of Tommy that were archived at the Santa Barbara Trust for Historic Preservation, but even the sound quality on those wasn't that good. So like it was pretty limited. The history of Jimmy's itself, they have a bunch of really cool artifacts you can go down and pick up and look through, and with gloves on and stuff, and in the basement at the Trust, and cool dishes and spoons and artwork and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to like film and video, there was a limited amount, but definitely the whole story was there to be told, and there was enough. So that's why it was 30 minutes. I think I set out to make like a 22-minute film or a half an hour long film. Yeah, it just seemed like the right length for this particular story.
And speaking of basements, you had access to the basement at Jimmy's, and knowing of the tunnels, they filled you in on that. Can you talk a little bit about being in that room, because it's not everybody gets access to that. Can you talk a little bit about how you felt being there to create that portion of the doc?
Yeah, that was cool. My brother now works for the Trust and is a director over there, so it seems like the access now isn't as big of a deal. But that was Mike Imwala, who's the archaeologist and one of the directors over there. And I felt like I was definitely, one of the special few that have been down in the basement. And it was smaller than I thought it would be, but it was really cool because they had all those old pinups of like the half-naked Chinese girls that used to be in Jimmy's, and that they won't allow back in there for some reason. But and all that stuff, and it seemed like that all the tunnels and stuff could be real. I think a local reporter did some research and poking around, and I don't know how much he found, but it seems like there definitely were some tunnels downtown Santa Barbara, and those are the legends, and it's fun to just play with it, even if the history is that accurate or not. I don't know, it's just fun to think about Santa Barbara having kind of that kind of eerie, sketchy, shady part of town or something once upon a time. I don't know, because otherwise it's pretty white and boring, I guess.
And let's talk a little bit about the score for the film itself, the jazz score, which is fabulous throughout. And I love the transition from when you're talking about the shadier side of the underground, how it goes into a piano motif of more of like a haunting sound. Can you talk a little bit about the musical score?
Oh yeah, I knew from the get-go, pretty early on when I started poking around and talking to people about the history of Jimmy's, that I found out that they just played jazz in the bar and really always played jazz. And when Bob reopened the place, that they still were primarily only playing jazz. They play some blues and maybe different music one night a week, but the soundtrack of Jimmy's is jazz. So naturally, the soundtrack of the film had to be jazz, and it has like a really cool eerie feel too, which lends itself to kind of the noir aspect. And like one of my favorite films is Chinatown. And so that, you know, the trumpet, the muted trumpet, and the eeriness of that sound, and the California like dry landscape and all those things, and the architecture in Santa Barbara, it just worked out well. And then it was one of those things making this film, like the more and more I dug and the more people I talked to, it just, you know, kind of was a snowball effect, and it all just like kind of started working out to my favor. We were going like a million miles per hour trying to make this movie, but one thing after another just lent itself to things like the soundtrack. And then one day I was talking to, I don't know if it was Bob Lovejoy or who, and I was surprised Willie hadn't mentioned him before, but Nate Berkey was this Chet Baker style jazz trumpet player that was a local at Jimmy's before they closed, and was really good friends with Willie, and then I downloaded his music and listened to like this whole catalog after I was already compiling a bunch of jazz and like a playlist. And then it turned out his music was almost better and fit the soundtrack of Jimmy's perfectly. So I was able to pick from his entire catalog for the soundtrack. It's primarily all Nate Berkey stuff.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, can we talk a little bit? You mentioned Willie, and he's a big part of this documentary because he's been there for so long that he really ties the whole family history all the way through to now at the Pickle Room. Can you talk a little bit about working with Willie and what kind of a guy he is?
Yeah, it was interesting because I think he was our first interview, and like every documentary, that's one of the hardest parts, is when you pull out the cameras and you start showing up around the area of which, you know, your film is set or the people live that are your main subjects. You have to kind of win them over and sell this idea of you as a filmmaker, and then the story, and that, like, you know, you're actually going to do a good job and all these things. So Willie was our first interview, and I had a cinematographer come up from LA. And so that was interesting, but it definitely kicked off making the film in the right way. And he wrote this beautiful obit for Tommy. Him and Tommy were best friends, and of course he worked there before they closed in 2006 for 22 years. And yeah, he's a great storyteller. He's a great joke teller, and he's still at Rinaldi's and the Pickle Room, so you can go see him and introduce yourself. And I'm sure he'll probably remember your name after, you know, the first time you meet him, or at least the second, and he'll probably remember what you drank too. He's just a great guy, and kind of a class act, the kind of people you wish were around more often.
Now, when in the midst of you interviewing Willie, there's the way you frame it. You put a lot of space behind him in some shots. Can you talk a little about that choice of shooting him like that?
That's actually funny, because that's because we didn't have a tripod, and I probably would have set something up a little more traditional. I had like my spare B camera and I only had one camera operator, and I was, you know, directing and asking questions and stuff. So we just set it up to where it could live on its own, you know, propped up on a book or something. And the cinematographer and me thought it would like kind of look cooler to do something less conventional with the Jimmy's Oriental Garden sign behind him, because like, that's what's behind him, is the history of Jimmy's. So I don't know, just one of those quirky decisions that happen in the moment, but it turned out fine. But yeah, I didn't have a tripod, so that's the main reason why that shot looks the way it does.
Well, it's a nice artistic look, and I truly enjoyed it. Can we maybe talk a little bit about the choice of the people you interviewed? Because I'm sure there's even more interviews out there and people that wanted to be a part of this. Can you talk a little bit about how you started coming across all these different people that you talked to?
Yeah, it was the same kind of thing. Like once I got the okay from Bob to make the film, and he was all behind it, he set me up at the bar with a tab so I could get to know everybody, and it was just kind of natural. The people from the old days that were still hanging around, and then him and Willie, Bob and Willie, both called the people that they thought would be most suitable for the film, and that would tell the story the best. I think like Dana Crampton, the postman, and the doctor, and the lawyers that were hanging around, and like that whole scene that was around before they closed, like in the 90s and the early 2000s, I think, because those guys were still around and closest to Bob and Willie. So it was just it's kind of a natural progression. But yeah, one name led to another, and it was just a cool evolution of casting, really. And then I kind of modeled it after Cheers a little bit. They kind of had like a similar cast of characters. I talk about it in an article in the Independent, but Willie was like the Ted Danson figure, and Esther, who became Willie's wife, they've been married more than 30 years now, but she was like the Carla figure. She was really sassy, and would tell off customers if they were jerks, and she had a quick wit and stuff. So, and then of course the postman.
Was there anyone that you're really looking forward to trying to have in the film but weren't able to put in there?
Well, yeah, it's a bummer that Tommy had passed away after he closed the restaurant. It would have been really neat if he was in the film to be able to tell more of his family history. And then, of course, his mom, if she was still around, and then his wife. But we were relatively limited. I think Tommy's adopted son spoke for the family, and that's how the Chung family wanted it on that side. And then, of course, we have Barbara Chung, who's Tommy's sister, but Tommy wasn't available because he died of cancer, which was really sad after he closed the restaurant. And, I think that was another reason why the film was important to people like Willie and Bob and stuff, to have just a piece of Tommy to remember him by, And then, of course, Bob passed away really sadly a couple of years ago from a stroke or brain aneurysm. And that was a big shock to the whole community as well, because we all thought he'd be around for another 20 years, kicking around in his bar and going out to Baja. And, we all miss him dearly too. So this resurgence of the film being played and you guys bringing light to it is really cool, because it's also a tribute to Bob, because he's not around anymore. But of course, the bar will live on now, and I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. People love it, and it's like one of the only bars in town, I think, that has held on to the real Santa Barbara old school history, in my mind. Besides a place like Arnaldi's or Joe's, there's they're dwindling, those types of places in Santa Barbara, and that's like old Santa Barbara history, and it's cool to have around.
Yeah. Rewatching it after 5 years, it was great to see Bob, and I remember him from going in there and seeing him sitting in the corner every night and just hanging out, and he was such a funny guy to talk to, so it was really nice to see him again. Can you talk a little bit about the title Grasshopper for Grandpa? I know it was the title of Matt Ketman, as it deals with in the film, Matt Ketman's story that he did when they were closing. Can you talk a little bit about that title and what it means to you to have that title?
Yeah, I just wanted a unique title, and that was another thing that worked out, was that if I were to adapt an article, it was kind of like I adapted the idea of Matt Ketman's article in the Independent, of like Willie being this kind of old-fashioned, incredible bartender that you just didn't stumble upon that often anymore. And what he represented and what this bar brought together in the community in terms of people and intellects and hobbies or whatever. But it was a really special place to a lot of people. And Grasshopper for Grandpa, it was just a really cool essay in the Independent, and I like that he, since I wanted really to be the center of the film, and really is the center of that article, and then, of course, Grasshopper and its symbolism in Chinese culture and what it means and how it's a good luck charm and all those things.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful title for a beautiful film, and what are they doing now to keep the memory of Jimmy alive and all of the restaurant and everything? What is Pickle Room up to right now to keep that memory alive?
Well, Clay has taken it over. He, of course, also did the rehab and the renovation of the bar when his dad was around. So that was kind of a team effort. And so Clay is manning the place now. And the Sandbar Trust for Historic Preservation, where I mentioned my brother is one of the directors now, they own the building. So I think it was in the agreement when Bob took over the lease and was restoring the bar that they, would have to, there were certain things written into the contract. And I think one of them is that they were going to have a museum exhibit, a small exhibit in the bar. It was part of the deal. And so they just finished that. And so the back wall of the Pickle Room now is that classical picture of Jimmy and his son Bill behind the bar in like the 50s, and the postmen are all sitting at the bar and stuff. And there's some cool literature and stuff to read. Some people will like it, some people, might not like it, but I think it's pretty cool when you walk in, you see that old picture and on the back wall there. And then they have a bunch of art that painters and artists of other mediums have donated and given to the Pickle Room of the building itself that are still on the walls, and that will all remain. And then, they have, the menu is, Asian influenced. It's not Chinese. They have a couple Chinese items, and they just redid the recipe for the vegetarian egg roll. That's really good, and stuff like that. And they celebrate Chinese New Year, and they have the Jimmy's right on the garden side. It's the same old staff of bartenders they've had pretty much, since they opened. And it's that kind of old timey place. And there's, Bob has his drink on the menu and things like that are cool.
And can we touch a little bit on the importance of a documentary like this, especially during times of now, people in quarantine not being able to hang out with their friends? This rewatching this, it's like almost like you don't have to be from Santa Barbara to feel like you're a part of that community watching this film. And can you talk a little bit about the importance about documentaries dealing with subject matters like this, especially during a time where we can't be together?
Right. Well, yeah, it was a really special thing when I was making it, and how people came out of the woodwork to tell stories, and how people put bad blood behind them and stuff, and come together when something means something. And this bar really did mean that much to so many people. And it's a place, even if I didn't go there when I was younger because I wasn't quite old enough, when I did start going there, it was one of those places I could go in by myself and I would know 5 to 10 people or whatever. And so it would just be a really good time. And the sense of community is everlasting there, and it's a beautiful thing. And so that's the kind of camaraderie and companionship Jimmy's and the Pickle Room provide for people. And that also is kind of an old Santa Barbara vibe. It just represents everything good about Santa Barbara in my eyes, and like the Santa Barbara I grew up in, so. But yes, I'm sure we're all ready to go back out there, but it might be a while. But yeah, we definitely miss places like Jimmy's. So.
Well, as we wrap up this, I wanted to ask you, do you have any future projects coming up that the viewers should be looking out for, us programmers at the festival should be looking out for? You have anything in the works right now?
Yeah, I spent most of quarantine trying to do more writing and stuff, to do more narrative feature type stuff, and I have a few projects in the works, which is exciting. But I am working on a full length music doc that I just started shooting. I just got a new camera, so I definitely have the documentary bug, and that's what I do. And I may be doing one on the Barbarettes, which was like the first drill team in Santa Barbara, and they performed at the first Super Bowl and stuff. But I don't know. We'll see how much documentary and Santa Barbara theme stories I can handle it in the next year or so. But I'll be working on that music doc for sure. And it's about the music producer and engineer Robinson Eikenberry. So that should be a fun one. And there's a huge community of Santa Barbara musicians and artists that will be involved with that. So not unlike the Jimmy's film, it'll be a big community piece, which is exciting. And I'm going to learn even more about my hometown, and I think it would be really cool to play at the festival, because it probably have like 30 plus people from Santa Barbara in the film. So that'll be interesting. And it will tell a part of Santa Barbara music history that a lot of people don't know much about, like the alt scene in the 90s and the 2000s and stuff, which is cool. And some big bands that came out of here. And I hope one day soon that the music scene, God forbid COVID doesn't bury more musical establishments in Santa Barbara, but I hope the live music scene starts to thrive again, and some new hipper places are opened, and there's places for young people to play, and people want to come through Santa Barbara, and there's not just big venues, there's small venues too. And even at, the high school and junior high level, we had the living room and places like that. So music is a great thing, especially in a town like Santa Barbara. And so that's another reason why I want to make that film. So yeah, that's a project I'm starting to work on more heavily.
Wonderful. I really look forward to seeing that project, and we love all your Santa Barbara docs. So I hope you do keep doing them. They're really amazing. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Casey. And I hope we can meet up for a drink sometime once this is all over with, and catch up. So thanks for being here and being a part of this. All right. Have a good rest of your trip, man.
Thank you.